Hello and welcome back to part 2 of this Boeing 787-10 quick start guide. We have departed from Amsterdam and we're currently at our cruise altitude of 5,000 feet, making our way over to Rotterdam. And we've got a flight time of around about another 20 minutes, so I'll take you through the descent and approach before making our arrival and landing onto runway 06. So the first thing I'm going to do is load in our descent winds. If you watched part 1 earlier, you would have seen me load in all the wind data for both the climb and the descent from SimBrief. So that's already been requested. All I need to do is hit the load button, and there we go. And next we're going to tune in the ILS, so we hit the NavRad button. So I will just check my Navigraph charts and pop that in, which is 109.1 on a course of 57 degrees. And that is the ILS tuned. So if we come up to the PFD, if we've done it correctly, it should appear in the top left corner. There it is there, all tuned in, ready to go. Next thing we do is go to the approach ref page and add in our speed and flaps for landing, which is going to be 30 degrees of flaps at 147 knots. And again, if we've done this correctly, it will appear in the bottom left of the PFD, just as a reference to look at as we're coming into land. And I've just noticed we need to switch to standard pressure, as we've got a little warning there. Okay, so another check of the charts, and we need to enter our minimums, which for Rotterdam is 195 feet. So we just need to spin the barrow round until we get to 195, which for some reason in the 787 is really fiddly. It either does 1 foot at a time or jumps about 100 feet, so just need to take my time with this and get it loaded in correctly. And there we go, 195. Good. Now we can also preload our QNH, which is 1002. And that will appear just below the green standard pressure in the PFD. Okay, we are getting there. And the next thing I like to do is add some fixed rings at Rotterdam, just so we get a nice visual reference on the nav display as we're coming in on our approach. So we add the Rotterdam VOR identifier, which is Romeo Tango Mike, and drop that in the top left. And my personal preference is to have a fixed ring at 5 miles, 10 miles and also at 25 miles. As I said, it's a really good visual reference to have on your nav display. As you're trying to get the energy out of the plane, you know how far you are away from the airfield at all times, so very handy indeed. So if we come up to the nav display, we should be able to see those fixed rings we've just added. If I zoom out a little bit more, there we go, we can see we've got a green dotted line at 5, 10 and 25 miles. Right, so we're about 41 miles from top of descent, so I think we'll take this opportunity to have a little look outside the aircraft and take in some of the stunning scenery as we approach Rotterdam. Right, so now's a good time to look at the descent checklist. So we have a recall check, which all looks good, so we'll check that. We've got auto brake. Now we're going to set that to 3. It's quite a short runway at Rotterdam, so we'll set that to 3 and check that. Landing data, VREF and minimums, that's all done, so check that. Approach briefing done, and that is our descent checklist complete. The simulator really is looking good today. I cannot get enough of these views. Just look at this. The sun reflecting off the water there looks really, really good. Okay, so we've still got about 28 miles to our top of descent, so I think what I'm going to do is wind the time on, and then we'll catch up again when we're at the top of descent, and we can carry on with our approach into Rotterdam. Okay, so we're approaching our top of descent marker now, so we can start thinking about our descent, and we'll begin by winding the speed back a touch. We'll take it down to 220 to start with. Essentially it's an exercise in speed management when you're planning a descent, so the more you stay ahead of the aircraft the better, and you're less likely to have any mistakes later on. Also, you always want to keep your heading bug pointing in the direction you're going, so let's bring that round as well. Right, so we're down to around about 220 now, so we can start by putting out our first stage of flaps, so that can go to flaps 1. And if we take a look across at the first officer's nav display, we get a little indicator there for our flaps. And we're now approaching around about 5 miles to top of descent. So before we pass over the top of descent mark, we need to make sure that our lowest altitude is set in the MCP, so you just need to double check the charts. For this we've got 2,000 feet set, so as we pass over the top of descent marker here, the plane will automatically start descending, and we'll get a little readout in the bottom right of the nav display just to let us know everything is as it should be. Okay, there we go. Now we've passed over the top of descent marker, the plane will start coming down all by itself. Might just need to wind a bit of speed back as well. We'll take that down to around about 200 knots, should be fine. Okay, this is all looking good so far, so let's go to flaps 5. And we're about to start our right hand turn into our final approach, so if we come outside the aircraft we should be able to see the plane starting to bank around to the right. And there we go, the engine's spooling up nicely and around we come. It's looking good. And let's wind a little more speed back. Let's take it back to 195. You love to hear that, the engine's spooling up, so the auto thruster's doing its job, keeping us on profile. Really is a fantastic approach, isn't it, into Rotterdam? Look at this, absolutely beautiful. And let's bring that heading bug round, keep that on track. There we go. And we're about to make our final right hand turn into our approach. You can see my fixed ring at 10 miles, giving us a good visual indicator, so we know where we are in relation to the airfield. Okay, let's have a quick look at the landing checklist. Okay, speed brake is armed, gears not down just yet, but we shall do that shortly. Okay, as we're coming round now, it's about time to arm our approach mode, which is this button here. So let's hit approach mode, and let's also continue winding the speed back, and we'll also go flaps 10. And heading bug round to our final course of 56 degrees, and gear down. If we pop outside the plane to have a look at it, you should see it coming down nicely. I love that, just great. There it goes, gear down. And let's confirm the gears down on our landing checklist. Yep, that's all good. And we're just approaching 10 miles, and I have visual on the runway. Flaps 15 and speed back to 152. Flaps 17.
2500.
Flaps 18. And a quick visual check of our flaps and speed for landing. We need to be at 147 knots, 30 degrees of flaps. So let's dial our speed in now of 147. And flaps 20. Flaps 25. and flaps 30. Okay, so that's the aircraft stable and fully configured for landing. Let's do it. Quick overhead check, landing turn off lights on, and we'll also give the crew a quick pong. Right, here we go. I'm just keeping my eye on the altitude because when we get to about 1,000 feet I will disengage the auto thrust and the autopilot and we will manually fly the landing. Okay, that's auto thrust disengaged and autopilot off, and we have the controls. 787 is actually quite tricky to handle as well, so you'll see me making lots of sort of adjustments to the yoke and trimming a lot because yeah, it can be a little bit slippery on the approach, so we'll just have to see how we get on. And I've got my eyes fixed on the flight directors at all times just to make sure that those magenta diamonds are on profile and we are maintaining our glide slope.
Approaching minimums. Minimums.
And idle throttles and flare, touchdown, and full reversers, and the auto brake doing a wonderful job at slowing us down, and I'm just trying to maintain that centre line as best as possible. And you know what, that has gone pretty well. Welcome to Rotterdam. And flaps up and speed brake disengaged. In all honesty, I could have vacated there, couldn't I? I'm actually going slower than what I thought I was, so doesn't matter, we'll go up to the next one, that's fine. And landing lights off, runway turn off lights off, taxi lights on, and APU on. I think for the taxi I'm going to speed up time again just so it's not too boring, then we'll catch up again on the stand and we'll go through the shutdown procedure. Okay, we're just parking up on our stand now, trying to follow the directions from our ground crew, and I can't actually see a thing, so I'll go to outside view and we'll just inch forward A little bit more. Okay, that should do it. Parking brake on. And fuel cut-off switches engaged. So we will switch the packs off. Fuel pumps can go off. Taxi lights off. Strobe off. Nav and beacon off. Hydraulics will go to off. And the probes can go off. Basically working our way around in reverse that we did for startup. Emergency exit lights off, doors off. We will switch on the ground power and turn the APU off. And that pretty much concludes our shutdown procedure. And with that we will end part 2 of this Boeing 787-10 tutorial guide. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Goodbye.